Hi guys, here we are back again with Chapter 4, Comprehension, Memory, and Cognitive Learning. So we're going to go over these topics. We're not going to go into too much crazy detail on them, but we are going to go through them in some of the basic terms. So here we go. Learning outcomes. Identify factors that influence consumer comprehension, memory. Explain how knowledge, meaning, and value are inseparable using the multiple stores memory theory. Understand how the mental associations consumers develop are key to learning. Use the concept of associative networks to map relevant consumer knowledge, and apply the cognitive schema concept in understanding how consumers react to products, brands, and marketing agents. So that's like a lot of stuff and a lot of terms, but as I said, we're going to go through. We're not going to go into a lot of great detail, but just talk about some general concepts. So comprehension is how we assign meaning to things that we see. And again, unlike perception, a lot of these things are based on internal factors within ourselves, thoughts we already have, our personality, our temperament, and experiences that we've had in the past. So it includes thinking, cognitive thinking, and affective elements, which is our attitudes towards them, how we respond to them. So with one thing is this idea of the signal theory, and that explains ways in which communications convey meaning beyond the explicit or obvious interpretation. So things that might not be as obvious to us. So different factors that impact consumer comprehension. The message itself, how we respond to it, the words that are used, the typeface that's used, that kind of thing, the images with it, the message receiver, and where we're receiving the information. So is it on a, is it through a billboard? Is it from a friend? Is it in a magazine we trust, that kind of thing. So characteristics of the message, actual physical characteristics, color, font, numbers, the spacing and the shape, how we respond to the actual aesthetics of it. Simplicity, how simple is it? And then also how consistent is the message in terms of the information that's around it. So, talking about, say, a resort or a vacation destination. Is it in a place that you would think, oh, that must be a really beautiful spot? You have an image of it as being a beautiful spot, say, maybe in the Caribbean, or is it a place that you never would think of as being beautiful, say, in a cold climate or a impoverished country, that kind of thing. So also this whole idea of figure-ground distinction. Again, how we respond to the way something looks. So there's the focal point, which is the figure, and then the background. So what's going on, someone looking very calm and pristine, but there's chaos behind them, for example. So the type of language we use, expressions that send some sort of non-literal meaning, figurative language, sayings, that kind of thing. And it's often used when describing brands that compete on hedonic value. Remember, hedonic value is about the experience. And then literal language. And literal language is used when we're talking about things that have utilitarian value. So characteristics of the message, again, the source. So again, we talk about this is really part of the basic communication model that we talk about in other areas too. We talk about this in organizational behavior. How likable is the source? Do we find it attractive? Do we, can we relate to it? Do we feel that the source has some level of expertise? Trusting the source. The type of publication it's in, or the website it's on, or something like that, or the area that you see it. Trustworthiness, and again, congruence. Does it make sense? So the other thing too is the characteristics of the receiver. So how much do they understand? How intelligent are they, or what is their ability? How much do they understand about? How much do they understand about the product or the service that's being communicated about? How much information they have about it? How involved and interested are they with it? Is it a product they're familiar with, they use on a regular basis? The physical limits of it in terms of actually seeing it. Expectations. So what are the expectations that you might have of this product? And or you might have again, the expectation you might have, say, like we talked about, like a vacuum cleaner. And then brain dominance, that really has to do with how our own individual brains work. And again, we don't have to go into too much detail about that. But okay, so also the characteristic of the environment. So where are we receiving it, and what is the environment like? How easy is it to comprehend the information? Are we like on a busy street, or are we looking at something quietly in our home? Framing, meaning of something that's influenced by the information environment. So is it influencing it? When we talk about framing, is it where we're seeing it? Is it influencing our thought about it? On the side of a bus station, a bus shelter, that might be we might look at things differently than we say seeing something in a newspaper or magazine. So, and the consumer will take that situation, that context. When we talk about framing, you can also say context, that and transfer to see how much they would, credibility they would put to it, how risky they might think it is, that kind of thing. And then message media, just that, how, what's the medium they're using to get the information across? Is it, someone driving down the street with a bullhorn, or again, is it, a respected publication? So this idea that also the characteristics of the environment, certain environments might change the way people think about things. That the goal is to change the way people think about things, or in a positive way. And again, if someone's thinking about something in a concrete, meaning literal sense, or abstract, which is more figurative sense. And again, also the timing of it, when they're seeing it, and that kind of thing. Okay, so there are a couple of different ideas about this idea of keeping multiple things in your head at the same time. And there are a couple of different things that we look at. One is sensory memory. So smell, touch, taste, feel. So these are things that when someone's exposed to one of the five senses, they say that smell is has the longest memory for us. A smell from childhood, or maybe from your grandparents' house or something like that. Workbench memory, or working memory, that it's when we store our memory. This idea of the workbench. So if you think about the workbench, like what's on your desk, and that you might not be thinking about it all the time, but it's there. It's something that you're aware of. And long-term memory is where all the memory that we have is stored, and everyone's long-term memory is different. So here we go. It's just a visual of it. I like visuals. This is from the textbook. So sensory memory has unlimited capacity. There is some limit in the duration. The iconic memory is this idea that things that will stick out for you, that maybe mean something else, mean something larger. As I said, like a certain smell might trigger some sort of positive family memory. Workbench memory has limited capacity, also limited duration, and this is where we code things to help us understand them better. And then finally, long-term memory, again, unlimited capacity, unlimited duration, semantic, or we have word meaning for it, and also this idea of association. We've talked about association before, associating brands with where you see them. You associate, say, luxury car with wealth or something like that. Okay, sensory memory, we're going to go through. Storage of visual information is an exact representation of the scene. So again, it's some sort of specific thing. Echoic storage of auditory information in sensory memory. So you remember hearing something. So we might have a lot of ability, but we don't necessarily remember it for very long. And then haptic perception, interpretations created by the way an object feels. Like a certain piece of clothing or something like that. Workbench memory is this idea of, as I was saying, if you think about all the things, say on your desk or something like that. So you encode it and it could try to understand it for something long term. and then at some point you bring it out, you retrieve it back. Some of it depends upon how long that stimuli is there in terms of duration, how involved you are, how much of it you can recall. It's the idea of workbench memory. Oop. So mental processes that help consumer remember things. One is repetition. Thoughts held in short-term memory by mentally repeating the thought. You meet someone and you remember the name, or you see a product for the first time, you remember the name. Dual coding, when two different sensory traces are available to remember something. So you have maybe two triggers to remember something. Meaningful encoding is when you associate it with something else. And then finally, chunking, that a group of things become one memory. So you might put one large experience, say, out to dinner or at a store, that you chunk all those things together. So workbench memory is kind of where meaning happens. So as I said, we have to think about it as the desk that you're working on. So long-term memory functions like a shopping cart containing all the knowledge with other things that are on the top, things at the top of the work that are going to the workbench. And then you're exposed to that over and over again. You might remember it or might not remember it. And then the idea is the more you're exposed to it, then the more you're going to put it on the workbench or on top of the desk. So long-term memory and learning, semantic coding, type of coding where stimuli are converted into meaning that can be expressed verbally. So you assign a word to it, essentially. You know what the word is for it. You know that those are running shoes. You know that that's a certain type of kitchen equipment. You know that that is, clothing or something like that. Memory trace, so the idea that when you retrieve it. And then when you, this idea of spreading activation, that you take all those things and then they become some sort of, the concepts come together and it comes some sort of special meaning for it. Okay, so mental tagging, again, we associate a name with it. Rumination is the idea that we think about it and then unintentionally it pops up again. And then nostalgia is the idea that that could fall into, say, seeing a certain style of dress that reminds you of someone that you feel positively about, or a smell or something like that. So elaboration is this idea that how much a consumer continues to process them even after they understand something. So this idea that how much you think about it, really, and then how much you can view yourself as part of that. So, for example, can you really see yourself in that car? Can you see yourself wearing that type of clothing? Can you see yourself eating that type of food, or using that type of furniture, that kind of thing? So how much can you actually see yourself in it? And then there's this whole idea of associative networks. Again, we've talked about association, that we link things together. And that's really all we need to, this is a little bit more detail than we need in terms of understanding how the brain works. But things that represent facts and things that that we know to be true, and how we connect that information. So products and brand schemes, marketers are very interested in that because they want you to be sure to associate their brands with certain positive things. So, do you think of Cheerios in a positive way, that kind of thing, and assign some meaning to it. So it's this idea that, so a brand, how you associate a brand, Pillsbury, General Mills, Nike, Under Armour, Ford, GM, and then within that brand, how you also, when we talk about the specific products, all of that, do you think about all those things together? Does it make sense together? Can you organize them in a thoughtful way together? Can the consumer organize them in a thoughtful way together? Okay, so there's also this idea of the exemplar, which is the most representative of some sort of category. So And everyone's going to have a different experience with that. Everyone's going to have a unique experience. And you can have some sort of comparison as to whether something belongs into a category. So, does a certain type of car fit into your category of a sports car, that kind of thing. And then prototype is something that doesn't exist necessarily. A schema best represented by some category, but that is not represented by an existing entity. So something that doesn't already exist, like as an ideal that you're thinking about. So exemplar, it exists. Prototypes, it doesn't exist, but it's a possibility. So brand and product schema, again, talking a little bit more about that. Reaction to a new product involves some sort of comparison with what you already understand. So in electric cars, like how does that compare to your existing idea of a car? And so you might remember the script is actually like, an actual event that occurred, say when you were in a car or driving in a car or saw a car. And then episodic memory is this something that you actually experienced. So if you have, if it's something is related to a positive event, then, I don't know, something's related to some sort of positive activity that's occurred in your life, then you're going to be more likely to buy it than you would be otherwise. Okay, social schema or social stereotype, essentially how it relates to who you, like demographically, who you are right now, and whether or not you have already owned that product. So it's a social stereotype. So what is it that's expected in a larger group of people, or your larger experience within your family or your culture? Okay, so quick summary here. Consumer comprehension is influenced by the characteristics of the message receiver, and the environment. Multiple store theory views the memory processes utilizing the sensory, workbench, and long-term memory within the human brain. Repetition, dual coding, meaningful encoding, and chunking help consumers remember things. It's a way we organize thoughts for easy retrieval. Knowledge and long-term memory is often stored in an associative network. So we like almost like triggers. We categorize things together, things we can afford, things we can't afford, things we enjoy, things we don't enjoy. And consumers' knowledge for a brand is contained in a schema or a story. Like consumers' knowledge is a part of a larger story. Okay, so that's it. And we will see you back here for Chapter 5. Thanks.